hold hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys. Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestel.
This is a show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 199.
Woo!
Yes, sir. And we are coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about, but can never quite reach. Mr. Paul Bestel, how you doing, my friend?
I'm very, very well, thank you. Autumn is upon us, and the weather doesn't know what's happening, as it seems to be everywhere at the minute. And my thoughts and sympathies and concerns are with everybody in the southeast of the US over the last 2 or 3 weeks, because I'm not really sure how things can get any worse for those guys down there at the minute.
No, I'm almost afraid to say that just in case.
Well, I don't own a weather-making machine, so I'm not responsible.
Sure.
I just hope everybody's okay. I mean, it's strange now doing a show, because obviously I've got to know people who live in Florida and the Carolinas and Georgia. So 5 years ago, I'd be looking at these events and going, oh dear, that's terrible. And now I'm thinking, I actually know people in the middle of this.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man.
Well, I have nothing so apocalyptic to report. I will say I had we had a minor triumph with Fear Daily. Fear Daily hit #1 on the iTunes fiction charts.
Woo!
In Uruguay. So South America knows what's up. So yeah, we're at as of today, we're at number 24 in the US and 23 in Canada. No, sorry, it was 24 in the US, 25 in Canada. But again, Uruguay, with their immaculate sense of taste regarding fiction podcasts, they got us to #1.
Yes, I could see you settling in Montevideo.
Hey, I mean, I can't possibly speak Spanish worse than I speak English, so.
Well, there you go, my friend.
It's all lining
Hola,
up.
hola, hola.
Deported after day 1. Oh, that's never happened before. So yes, that is very cool. And of course, you can listen to Fear Daily, a daily horror fiction podcast, anywhere fine podcasts live. And also now, you can get the audiobook version of Strange 2.0.
Woo!
Yes, finally. It only took me 2 years to get that out the door. Of course, with a forward read by none other than Mr. Paul Bestel himself. Available on Amazon or on Audible, basically. That is where you can find it. And yes, I'm so grateful to have that done, man, because that has been an albatross around my neck for exactly 2 years. Like when I did that other audiobook, it took me 30 days. But mine, 2 years.
Well, at least you've got it out of the way now. It's done.
That's it. It's done. It's out there. And I can't talk about it yet, but I'm in the very early stages of a very exciting new audiobook project with an author I respect very, very much.
I know you are.
Yes, you know. You know the great and true secret.
I do. I've seen the posts about it.
Oh, has she actually put up posts? Oh, okay. Well,
well, without naming anything and saying what a wonderful voice you have.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I knew exactly what she was talking about, but that's because I am connected with secret societies all around the world.
That's true.
In my role as the Count of Saint-Germain. I was saying the very same to my friend Dorian Gray the other day in the pub.
A Tuesday in the life of Paul Bestel. For Bison, it was Tuesday. But yes, so once all that is arranged, I will talk more about it publicly, but we're just hammering everything out right now, but I'm very, very excited for it. I'm excited to be reading someone else's ghost books, because boy howdy, am I fucking sick of reading my own.
Well, I'm chuffed to bits for both of you. Congratulations and well done, Uruguay.
Hola.
Yes, makes up for them being one of the dirtiest football teams ever to walk the planet.
Well, until we drop off #1 on their charts, I have to defend them. So mom and dad are going to fight, but...
Montevideo or bust.
Exactly. But before then, we have a great show lined up for you. We have an episode built around stories involving the moon. We're calling it Under a Haunted Moon. We have 6 tales of terror lined up for you. Well, they're not all tales of terror, but I just like saying that. Before we get there, though, we got to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, we could not do what we do without you. So thank you. Thank you, thank you. For real, guys, every single person who downloads the Ghost Story Guys, you help make us who we are. But patrons, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube subscribers, you are truly the ones who make this great big machine go, and we are deeply grateful for it. While we'd like to thank all of our paid subscribers, we would especially like to thank our latest ones. They are
Nakatomi Freefall,
Frida Van Kugel,
Margaret Frame,
Ansel,
Dan,
Haley C.,
Boof,
Hey Boof,
hey Boof,
and Jennifer Shipley. Again, guys, thank you from the bottom of our terrible hearts. We genuinely could not do this without you. And while we'll wait till the end of the show to tell you about all the cool stuff you get, we will say for $1 a month over at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, you get an ad-free feed, and who doesn't want that? Ads suck. Again, if you want to support the show, follow the link in the show notes, or head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, or you can sign up to GST Premium via YouTube or Apple Podcasts. All right, we are going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with stories from under a haunted moon. The Pale Woman. I grew up living not far from my grandparents in rural Mymensing. Theirs was a tin shed house about 100 meters away from the road. The earthen path that connected my grandparents' house to that road wound around a deep pond and through a bamboo bush. During one of our visits, my father had taken me to the bazaar in the evening to buy some groceries and then sent me back with him. He told me to return with money so he could gamble with his friends. While headed back with the groceries, I passed a pond and heard a sound in the water. It was a splash, but a quiet and oddly drawn-out one. I stopped to investigate. High above me, a half moon hung in the sky, but its light was obscured by a bamboo bush above the pond. In the dark, I strained to see the water rippling and whatever had entered the water to cause it in the first place. After some time, I decided it must have been nothing and continued on. The wind picked up enough that by the time I was on my way back to my father, the bamboo bushes were swaying and I couldn't hear anything that may or may not have been happening at the pond. I stayed to watch him gamble with his friends for an hour or so before starting towards my grandparents' place again. The moon was now lower in the sky, and the shadows had lengthened. It was dark enough I had to focus fully on the path before me as I walked. I hadn't so much as glanced at the pond until I heard someone stepping on the water. I looked toward the source of the sound, and there she was. A woman sat cross-legged above the water. Her skin was a pearly white and seemed to exude a pale glow. You could mistake it for moonlight, but there was no way the moonlight could reach her where she was sat on the pond. Her hair, somehow darker than the shadows in the background, flowed weightlessly in the air. Her whole being seemed to be effortlessly floating above the water, bobbing up and down slightly. I thought her eyes were closed, but when I looked at them, I realized they were just the same white as her skin, and they were trained on me. So I ran all the way back to my grandparents' house, and by some miracle didn't stumble and fall even once. They asked me what happened, and after some deliberation in which I decided I was too embarrassed to say I'd seen a nude female ghost, I told them I saw a snake. I was laughed at for being that scared of snakes anyways, so I should have just told them what I'd seen. My father came back around midnight and seemed not to see anything. My grandfather died in 2020, and afterwards, my grandma decided to drain the pond and fill it in. During the process, they found an old lock with some hair tied to it, in exactly that spot where I saw her. Maybe the two are somehow related. I'll tell you right now, Paul, if I ever see a naked ghost, I will never stop talking about it. There was one time, actually, Nick and I were out driving. We were in the car with some friends, and all of a sudden Nick goes, "That woman's exercising in her underwear." And of course, all of us immediately crane our necks. Sure enough, there was a woman doing jumping jacks in front of her window, her open window. But then I noticed, because of course it was me, that she wasn't wearing any underpants. So she was nude from the waist down, just doing jumping jacks in front of the window. And when I pointed that out, immediately Nick said, look away, look. But the damage was done. This became, again, this is a story I tell at every available opportunity. When I am dead in the ground 150 years and vampire hunters dig up my corpse, I will rise up from the grave. And again, my final words before they drive a stake through my heart will be, I saw a woman exercise naked once.
See, you missed a trick when you were talking about seeing a naked ghost.
How's that?
Because you should have said you'd seen its boobies.
I don't want to laugh at that. I feel guilty laughing at that. I know we've become the dad joke show, but man, alive.
I've set a high bar with the Invisible Man joke last week.
That's very true. Yeah, that is very true. Good Lord.
But yes, interesting. Ghosts and water. And I would suggest that perhaps the locket has something to do with it, or the lock.
Yeah, because that story was originally from India. Sometimes with those stories, the English the translation isn't great. So I don't know if it was like a lock, like a physical lock, or if it was a locket. I mean, a locket would make more sense, but I don't know. I feel like if you find like a lock, like a padlock with hair wound around it at the bottom of a pond, you should be calling Grissom and the rest of the CSIs.
Very much so. There's clearly something gone on there. Where was it again?
Mensing, I think it's India.
I'm going to say, there's something somewhere similar, I think it's in Bangladesh.
Oh, you are absolutely right. It is Bangladesh. I apologize.
Because there's a haunted train station.
Oh, is there?
Yeah. I don't know much about Bangladeshi legends other than there's a haunted train station, and one of their most common spirits is known as a nishi.
Okay.
And that's all I can remember from a conversation I had with someone from Bangladesh about 10 years ago.
Let's look it up for the sake of the plot here. Nishi. All right, so this is from the folklorechronicles.com. In the remote villages of Bengal, where the mist hangs low over the paddy fields and the air grows thick with the stop scrolling me back up to the top, you stupid goddamn website. And the air grows thick with the whispers of ancient folklore. God damn it, now it's a pop-up to subscribe to their newsletter. And one, it's an AI-generated image, which pisses me off. Two, it looks like an elephant's prick. It's meant to look like a scroll. It looks like an elephant's prick. I am just closing that window right now. I know you can't see it. This is a visual joke no one's going to get, but it looked like an elephant's penis. Or what I imagine that to look like. I'm not intimately familiar. Yeah, sorry. Thank you for stopping me there. I was...
Yes. You can tell you've never been arrested.
It's true. Although I was questioned by the police recently. Did I tell you that? It was very brief. I was
about ogling a naked exerciser?
It was. Yeah. No. I managed to skate on that one. No, I was headed to the coffee shop here in town, and I say questioned. It was very, very brief. But yeah, a cop in an SUV calls me over.
Hey, loser. You get me some fucking donuts? Yes.
Man, it's like you were there. I did tell you the story.
Sorry.
No, he just called me over. He's like, is your name Brad? And I got to be honest with you. If I was wanted by the police, I would say no.
No, my name is Jim.
Yeah. Well, because at first I couldn't, it was bruh. And I'm like, oh, and so I hesitated and I went, no. And he's like, okay, go about your day. I was like, well, I hope if Brad has more than a room temperature IQ, he's going to be just fine.
Policing's different in Canada.
Yes.
When did they get off horses?
I didn't say he wasn't on a horse. It was an SUV horse. It's a whole thing.
A souped up horse.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways, back to Bengal.
Yes.
The legend of Nishi Dak is deeply rooted in the rural culture of West Bengal, passed down through countless fireside stories and whispered warnings. It is said that this supernatural being roams the desolate paths and forests at night, waiting to lure the unsuspecting into an eternal trap. The Nishi Dak, unlike any ordinary ghost, does not reveal itself as a terrifying apparition, nor does it rely on the typical scare tactics of the supernatural. Its weapon is far more cunning and sinister. It mimics the voice of someone you love. Oh, creepy. Well, yeah, I'll include a link to this in the show notes, folks. It's actually some pretty cool. It mentions a legend here, which I won't read the whole thing, but I think it would be interesting for folks to read.
Yeah, Bangladesh is one of those places. It always gets overlooked because of where it is, I think.
I got to be honest with you, Paul. Gun to my head, I couldn't point it out on a map.
Oh, right. Okay, I can.
Okay, good. I'll go get my gun. My souped up horse. Right over there, my souped up horse.
Call Brad. We're on. Yeah, it's part of the Indian Delta.
Okay.
So you got Bangladesh, Pakistan, and then obviously Sri Lanka off the coast.
Right. Okay. Yep. Now I know. I understand now. Yeah, I think Luke actually covered the Nishi Dak on one of his episodes of Luke Lore, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah. I'm just checking now. I'm right. It's next door to India. I thought it was. It's between India and The fucking country's that? That's not a real fucking country. What are you talking about there? The fuck is... Oh, Bangladesh. Oh, it's that weird bit of India. So India goes all the way up to Nepal, and then for some reason there's a big channel cut between Nepal and Bhutan, which is still India, and underneath that is Bangladesh, which is then surrounded once again by India on the eastern side next to Burma. So it's completely... It's enclosed on three sides by India, and then the Indian Ocean to the south. Yeti country.
Is that Yeti country?
Well, it's not that far away from Nepal and Bhutan, which are both hotspots for the Yeti.
Okay, I knew Nepal. I didn't realize Bhutan was as well.
Yeah, there's probably as many sightings, but Bhutan is a little bit less welcoming to outsiders.
That's fair. Literally, again, this is sort of revealing my limited scope of knowledge of these things. One of the few things I know about Bhutan is that the university in El Paso styled itself after Bhutanese architecture. That's the one thing I know about Bhutan. Aside from now, there are Yeti sightings, and they're not real big on outsiders.
I bet their flag's not as cool as Nepal's.
Oh, now I got to look up Nepal's flag.
It's unique in the world of flags as Nepal.
I mean, it kind of looks like either two baseball team pennants.
Is it the Cubs again?
I mean, I will say it doesn't look like any one team. It just looks like two pennants stacked on top of one another. Or it kind of looks like a character from Homestar Runner. Like the Cheat's cousin or something.
It's a great flag, though.
I agree.
Nepal's is quite unique because I think it's the only triangular flag in the world.
Yeah, you are correct. According to the Googles, at the very least, Nepal is the only non-rectangular flag.
Well, it's better than like they do in Europe. They just turn around.
Here in Canada, we just mostly take your flags and put them inside of other flags.
Yeah, what your flag's missing is a nice Union Jack.
There's enough of those on our flags. Like British Columbia basically is a...
Half right, aren't they?
I saw an article somewhere. Once you guys give up Chagos, the sun will finally be able to set on the British Empire. This amused me greatly.
Well, you know, Hawaii's got the right idea, hasn't it?
I mean, for a lot of reasons, but which one are you referring to?
It's the only US state with a British flag in it.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sure glad you know shit.
Yes. So really, there's only 49 states in America. And Hawaii is now part of the British Isles again.
Yeah, we're going to let you deal with Hawaii on that one.
Well, why not? Eat Captain Cook's the least we can do.
And if you want to throw Paul into a volcano...
You'll not be the first person to try.
Now that I believe.
Before dawn. Back in April, I went to a lakeside cabin with my family to celebrate my brother's birthday over the weekend. The cabin belongs to my sister-in-law's family. It's a gorgeous place surrounded by woods, and I hadn't felt that connected to nature in a long time. The cabin is in a different state from the one I live in, and it was a 5-hour drive to get there. Also, this is probably a good time to mention that this event took place in Brazil. I had spent the whole Saturday playing with my 3-year-old niece. We swam in the lake, played in the pool, and explored under rocks to see what bugs we could find. When night time came around, we all had dinner and stayed up late talking, singing, all that kind of thing. I was the first adult to go to bed because I usually sleep early, and I was feeling that good exhaustion that comes from a day well lived. I'd planned to wake up around 4:30 in the morning to make some coffee and watch the sunrise from the deck that stretched out into the water. However, I ended up getting up a little earlier, around 4 a.m, because I couldn't really stay asleep. I'd woken up many times throughout the night and I was having these weird dreams. I couldn't really remember them. When I decided to get up, all that was left of me in my mind was a name. Mantita Pereira. It's the name of a creature from Brazilian folklore, and I didn't really know why it came to mind, because it isn't a very well-known tale in the region I lived and grew up in. The only previous contact I'd had with it was from a song that only mentions its names. I didn't know the story behind it, so I just brushed it off and thought, how weird, and went on with my plans to make some coffee and wait for the sunset sitting on that deck. While I was making coffee, though, I heard my niece crying from the room she was sharing with her parents. I got worried, of course, but figured her parents would deal with whatever was going on, so I headed for the deck and sat down. My niece had stopped crying. Everything seemed fine. I was sitting on the deck watching the stars and listening to the sounds of the night. The water against the wooden structures of the deck, the splashing of the frogs and fish, calls of the nocturnal birds. I was in heaven. I got my degree in biology with a speciality in zoology back in 2018, and even though I followed a different career path, I'm still very enchanted by nature. While I was at university, me and my friends would birdwatch during most weekends, identifying all the species and things. This to say, I know my way around Brazilian birds, and this is important for the story. So there I was, enjoying my coffee and the rest of the night before dawn, when everything went silent. No animal sounds, nothing. It was like the whole landscape had suddenly been rendered devoid of life. And in came the sense of being watched. A gut sensation of impending doom. I felt really scared. It was like I'd been transported to a dying land and I was the next victim. I'd had my fair share of scares whilst in the woods, but I'd never heard nature going silent. I even considered I might have been dreaming at that moment, trapped in a lucid subconscious state of mind. I decided to look back at the house because that's where I felt I was being watched from. Had someone else woken up and was trying to figure out who's sitting on the dock in the darkness? When I looked back at the house, though, I didn't really see anything until I looked to the roof. It was a full moon out, bright enough to see it reflecting from what looked like jet black feathers on a massive bird-like creature. I froze instantly. I started searching my mind for what species of bird it could possibly be, but there were none. It was the size of a freaking person. I couldn't see its beak or face. It was like it was wearing a hooded veil, and only the shape of its head was visible. All I could see was the body, bird-like and skinny, but sort of flappy, and then its wings. It looked like it was adjusting them for flight, waiting for the right moment. I wanted to scream and run away, but I was just frozen in place watching this impossible creature. Suddenly, it opened its massive wings fully and flew to the right, towards the woods. Almost instantaneously, the sounds came back. Frogs, birds, even the water. And then the first colours from the sunrise were starting to show. I just broke down crying, feeling that I'd lost my grip on reality. I didn't tell this to anyone, but Mantita Pereira was burning in my brain, and when I looked it up I was floored. The accounts talk about a massive black bird that disrupts people's lives when they make deals with Mantita and don't follow through. I don't know why it was there. Was it after something from a family member of mine who was there? Or was it just passing by? All I know is that my niece has been experiencing night terrors that, coincidentally or not, started the same night.
I mean, I wouldn't be 100% shocked if I found out that someone in my family was making a deal with a bird monster. That would not be out of character for at least my mom's side of the family.
Mantita Pereira is one of those birds that it depends which version you hear, because most of the old Brazilian folktales suggest it is more of a striped cuckoo creature, though man-sized. It's only later it's turned into a giant black bird.
Oh, interesting. I couldn't find a ton of stuff on English language Google, but the stuff I did find suggested it had a little bit of a legend like the Skinwalker. It was like a shape-shifting witch. Has that been sort of consistent with what you've read?
Yeah, it's a shapeshift. It's a witch that shapeshifts into a bird at night.
Okay.
Very similar to more akin to the Mexican ones, more than anything.
Right. Okay. You know, a part of me wonders how much of those legends, the witch legends, are just a general fear of old people. You know, there just seem to be like, and I'm not even kidding. I just mean, there is sort of this weird fear we have, I think maybe of aging. And so when we look at the bodies of the elderly, we think, oh Christ, there but for the grace of God. And maybe it's just easier to imagine it as some kind of external evil than it is just something that happens to us naturally. Maybe.
It's one of those. It's got some strange. It's similar to a lot of things, like you saying. It could sort of embody all kinds of quasi-religious guilt of some description, wrapped up in a kind of dismissal of the old ways. But there's some odd things like women can switch places with it for a night if there's some kind of riddle or test or something, and if you don't pass it or you accept it, then you become the Mantita Pereira for the night, and then you go back.
Interesting. I'm just imagining what it'd be like if Nick just started going like, because she was a bird in her body. I just assume it'd be her paying me back for all my bullshit. I know, sweetie. Yeah, classic. Yeah, you got me good. Anyways,
again.
Yeah, time to watch another shitty 90s thriller. Yeah, it's a good joke. You don't have to keep it up. It's fine. But anyway, please continue. The Rougarou, you said.
Yeah, because the Rougarou's got a similar thing, hasn't it? About passing the curse on.
I actually didn't know that. I sort of, is that like similar to the werewolf, where you're actually, if you're attacked by it, then you're sort of one of it, or is it a kind of a different iteration?
It's a different iteration. The Rougarou is a curse. It's not a transmitted disease like a standard werewolf.
So how do you pass it on?
Essentially, if someone sees you, I'm trying to think, is it if someone sees you and they know who you are, they then become cursed, which is a bit shit. Oh, look, there's Steve. Steve! Oh, no. Yeah, that is Steve, and now I'm...
That would just be brutal.
Sure, there's like a time limit as well, like 100 days or something. It's been a while. I've not looked... I was talking about Rougarous recently, and I've completely overcome it because I'm trying to fill my brain up with Banshees and Bigfoot for some upcoming shows.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, again, folks, if you guys have any experience or knowledge of the legend of Mantita Pereira, please let us know. ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. This is one I'm not terribly familiar with, and like I said, there wasn't much out there when I looked around. Where have you seen most of the information about it, Paul?
Usually coupled together with sort of South American cryptid stories is where I first became aware of the Mantita Pereira.
Okay.
However, I am interviewing a Brazilian ufologist in the next couple of weeks called Tiago, so I might ask him.
Oh, very cool. I was recently reading something about Brazil, and I knew it was the biggest country in South America. I did not realize exactly how big that meant it was. It is bonkers.
Yeah, it's near enough South America.
Yeah.
Everybody else is like that.
That's it. I think I read that it's basically half the size of half of South America, and it's the size of Canada.
Yes.
Which is just a crazy thing to think about. It's like the rest of Canada is divided into all the other countries of South America.
Yeah. Is it the third or fourth biggest country in the world, Brazil? Landmass?
I wouldn't be surprised. I can neither confirm nor deny, but I would not be surprised.
Let's check it out. Fifth.
Oh, okay.
Russia, Canada. No, that's not right. That's bollocks. Total area in square miles, that's better. So Russia, Canada, America, China, Brazil. It's the fifth biggest country in the world.
As far as company goes, that's considerable. Those are big-ass countries. Again, I always forget how big Canada is.
Yeah. Can you guess why sixth?
Kazakhstan.
No, but that is in the top 10.
Damn it. I knew it was up there.
It's the one everybody forgets.
How's Bren doing, Stan? I have no idea.
It's Australia.
Oh, of course. It's always so small on the maps.
Kazakhstan's the ninth biggest country in the world.
Okay, top 10. I threw it out there and I was like, fuck, am I way off base? Is this just a leftover from Borat? No, I knew it was up there. In the Banana Grove. Whenever anyone in my family refers to Grandma's house, I always think of the Caren place in Singapore. The sprawling half-acre property was presided over by a stately 3-storied colonial house with whitewashed walls and a gently sloping terracotta roof. The house belonged to my paternal grandmother for over 30 years, except when it was used by Japanese army officers during the occupation from 1942 to 1945. The family had been fortunate that they were allowed at least a day's notice to vacate the premises. In those dark days, there were many instances where reluctant occupants were forcibly removed, often in a terrible, final way. It may well be that my father's family received special consideration because First Aunt Elsie, the oldest and prettiest of Grandma's daughters, was also the mistress of an army officer at the time. Cousin Ned is half Japanese. The approach from Cairn Hill Road to the entrance of the property was secured by a pair of ornate, white-coated metal gates. Thick bamboo groves behind the gates flanked the entrance, rustling and sighing with every passing breeze. The garden was a veritable jungle, spreading out on the left of the gravel driveway that led to the house. It overflowed with rich green foliage and shrubs vibrant with red, pink, white, and yellow tropical flowers. Lush banana plants lined the foot of the garden, providing shade on warm, sunny days. As children, we thought the garden was a fantastic wonderland. Many kung fu battles were held among the bamboo forest, where we fought off wicked bandits, carried out heroic missions against enemies, trounced the bloodthirsty barbarian hordes, and saved the empire. When we played nearer the house, the banana plants obligingly sheltered us beneath their wide leafy spread for thrilling games of hide and seek. Those were glorious, carefree days. There was no talk of darkness, plenty of food on the table, and the sun kept a cheerful eye on us all day. We were generally allowed to play havoc or run wild, scream and yell as we pleased, blissfully unaware of any past troubles when we romped in that garden. My father's family had inherited certain gifts from my paternal great-grandmother, as well as Grandpa. Grandma's mother was a village headwoman in Thailand, which meant that she was a wise woman who officiated over births, deaths, marriages, and other formal ceremonies. In her position, she had to have knowledge of ancient traditions and spiritual practices. After all, she lived during the late 1850s to early 1900s, when people walked a lot more closely with their beliefs in the spirit world. But that is all I know about the Thai side of the family. Second Aunt Maggie was a great source of information on all things weird and inexplicable, when Grandma wasn't around, that is. One Sunday afternoon, when Grandma was in the kitchen supervising the evening meal, Aunt Maggie said to my father that she needed to talk to him. No one noticed that my little pointy ears were in the vicinity. My older sister and cousins had decided to race each other around the garden that day. At age 5 and the youngest in our gang of 4, I was too short to keep up with them, so I was playing by myself on the wooden floor behind the large living room sofa, conveniently out of sight and mind. My young ears pricked up at the odd note in Aunt Maggie's voice. With the instinctive skill of the very naughty and sneaky, I instantly went quiet and on the alert. They spoke in a polyglot blend of Hokkien and Singapore English, with a smattering of Malay thrown in. My command of Hokkien was better in those days, and I could follow the gist of the conversation. "I hear Mother talking to someone in her room at night," Aunt Maggie confided to Dad. "Maybe she's listening to the radio?" When I asked her in the morning, she couldn't remember. "Don't be so nosy," said Dad in a chiding tone. Aunt Maggie persisted. "I'm worried about her." "She's not going crazy." Dad sounded annoyed. "Why don't you tell Ken?" First Uncle Ken was the oldest in the family. However, it was my father, the second oldest of the 5 brothers, that everyone went to with their troubles. "She listens to you." "I'm not the superstitious type," he said. "I don't see things." I didn't learn any more because my listening post was discovered at that point. I was summarily scolded and sent outside to join the gang. When I asked Aunt Maggie about that conversation some years ago, she was surprisingly vague about it. All she would say was that Grandma was just talking to the spirits. First Aunt Elsie and her youngest daughter Sonia had their own encounters. My aunt's bedroom was on the second story at the front of the house, where the window with its cream-colored shutters overlooked the garden. My cousin Sonia shared the room when she was very young. One sultry night, Sonia, who was about 4 at the time, was woken up by distant feminine voices coming from the garden below. She got up and padded over to the window to find who they could be. The moon glowed bright and round in the night sky, shining on a bevy of ethereal Asian-looking women gathered near the banana grove in the garden. They appeared to glide over the ground and were singing, laughing, or talking amongst themselves. Fascinated by the scene, Sonia quickly called for her mother. When Aunt Elsie saw what she was looking at, she hastily shushed her daughter and put her back to bed. Decades later, Aunt Maggie brought up this incident when the family got together for Sunday lunch, and we were reminiscing about the peculiar happenings at the Caren Hill house. By then, Grandma and Aunt Elsie had both passed away, and the property was no longer in the family. Sonia had already married and gone with her American husband to California. "Remember when Sonia saw the beautiful girls in the garden?" said Aunt Maggie. "Yeah, she said it was the banana tree ghost," said my dad with a chuckle. "I saw the girls myself," Aunt Maggie announced. "I also saw Mother and Elsie." "Say again?" Dad was openly incredulous. Aunt Maggie told us that she had problems sleeping on full moon nights. As she lay awake in bed, she could sometimes hear women's voices from beyond her window. On a few occasions, when she looked out the window, she was sure she saw Grandma and Aunt Elsie chatting with strange women in the banana grove below. At other times, she also glimpsed another group of women clustered near the bamboo groves at the gates. There was much excited and rather heated discussion among the family. Everyone had an opinion and wanted to share it, all at the same time. I learned a whole plethora of folk tales, legends, and spiritual beliefs from many different cultures that day. Among them is a Thai legend that tells of wild banana groves haunted by the gentle Nang Tani, or Lady of the Tani. On full moon nights, those female spirits can be seen floating above the ground near their banana plants. They are believed to be protective of women who have been ill-treated by men, such as the comfort women used by the Japanese who were kept at Caren during the occupation. As a child, I've seen strips of cloth tied around the trunks of some banana plants in the garden. I now know they were warnings that the Nang Tani might just be around. And so that's really interesting, Paul. Are you familiar at all with that legend?
The ghost that lives in banana trees, yes.
Really? So what do you know?
She is quite regarded as a benevolent spirit who is thought to bring luck and protection to people, who will make offerings to weary travellers and Buddhist monks as they wander on pilgrimages. You're not supposed to cut any bananas from the grove she inhabits.
Oh.
She's supposedly sort of got a greenish hue or tint to her skin, so she looks very at one with nature, and often has strikingly bright red lips. She's a much beloved spirit in Thailand, Singapore areas. There's a lot of love for her. So she's a very well-regarded spirit and classed as an omen. There's a very similar one in Japan, called something weird like a bamabushi or something, which basically just appears as a face in a banana tree.
That seems much more frightening.
Yes, and if you see a man, it means you're going to get pregnant. So I don't know what that means if you're a man.
We've all seen Junior. We know where this goes.
Yes. So, but yes, she is, the Nang Teng is very highly regarded. She's a much loved cultural spirit, both in folklore and modern culture.
Interesting. That seems very different from what we hear about most earth spirits. Because I feel like when people talk about earth spirits, especially sort of in Western Europe, there seems to be a general sense of we should give this thing a wide berth. You know, this is not something we want to exactly invite for dinner.
Yeah. Yes. It makes a very pleasant change, I think.
Oh, I agree completely.
And why not? But yes, and people leave offerings and things, and I think they tie a certain coloured ribbon around the grove that she inhabits. But yes, she's generally considered you are thought to be very special if you have a spirit living in your bamboo grove. Sorry, I keep saying bamboo. Your banana grove. So if you've got one, then everybody thinks you're the bee's knees.
All right. Well, as soon as I have a banana grove, that will be the first on my to-do list.
Get that advert on LinkedIn.
Oh, man. I saw an article today, speaking of LinkedIn. Someone has developed a little piece of software using Python to integrate OpenAI's, basically to use AI to apply for jobs. And I think it was 404 did a massive piece on this thing. Really interesting stuff, because obviously, this has nothing to do with ghosts, folks. I'll get it over with quick. But obviously, a lot of HR companies now, or HR parts of companies, they just use AI to filter resumes. A person doesn't even see them until step 2 or 3. And so now this person has developed a piece of software which will itself examine the job application, fill in your personal details, and then write on the spot a cover letter that incorporates all the bullshit that they want to see in your cover letter that their AI, that the company's AI is going to be scanning for. It's like that Bill Hicks bit about the puppet on the, I agree with the puppet on the left, the puppet on the right. Wait, they're both being held by the same guy. It's the same deal. You've just got the two halves of the same bullshit talking to each other. It really is dystopian and terrifying.
Good. Well, hopefully they'll eat each other.
We can but hope. It's funny, actually, whenever I post an anti-AI meme on the Instagram, there's always, it's always novel to see who comes out of the woodwork in support of it.
Crypto King, number 7.
Yeah.
Musk rules.
Also them.
846.
I take such pleasure in posting things, mostly on the stories, about how much I dislike Elon Musk. It just makes me happy.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, I wish we had never heard of him.
Yes, that's very true.
You know, going back to the previous story, we were talking about shapeshifters and things like this. And you and I were talking in the patron segment about Crimes of the Paranormal, the series we were discussing on the last episode.
Yes.
That Hulu paranormal series, which we both quite enjoyed. And I just finished watching it, as I told you the other night. The last one was about the trial of the Skinwalker, something like the Skinwalker defense. And boy, what a great example of someone who has no idea what the hell they're talking about, taking that particular legend. Because again, I think the notion of what is or isn't a Skinwalker has just completely gotten out of control. You know, this has sort of become like a lot of paranormal things. It just becomes a thing people use to sell T-shirts. You know, it's not. It's divorced a lot from its cultural meaning. But some jackass got away with murder, or so it very much seems the case, because someone who claimed to be a professor on Native American studies made it was not a compelling case, but I guess if you're at the jury and you've recently suffered a head wound, he made a compelling case that, well, maybe it was an evil witch that did this murder and not the guy who lured her out to his car. And it was the most infuriating shit in the world. Yeah.
That's my I'm tired of this shit, Si.
Me too, man. Me too. Again, I go through periods where I think maybe none of this is real. Maybe I'm wasting my life talking about shit that isn't real. But then I think it's because so much of this stuff is just cynical garbage and people just saying shit to say shit, you know, because they've got like a newsletter to hawk. And again, then I'll have a moment where I sit back and go, no, I've seen things. I know this. There's something happening. Like that's always been my claim is like, I don't know what is happening, but something is happening. But man, charlatans like that and these hucksters, they really kind of bum me out sometimes.
Yeah, you need to talk to your spirit guide, Becky. She'll guide you.
I can always count on Becky.
Straight up the boulevard to Grift Avenue.
I wasn't sure where that was going for a second. Just before we move on to the next story, I just finished reading the book, I'm Starting to Worry About This Black Box of Doom by Jason Pargin. Really, really good book. It's sort of a, not even sci-fi, it's like a road trip comedy in a way, like a road trip satire about this internet kid who drives for Lyft and ends up being hired to take a young woman and a box across the country. And it sort of shows how this conspiracy theory starts being spun about what's actually in the box. And by the time they're halfway there, by the time the end of day one, this massive subreddit has grown up around this with people ascribing all these insane theories to what they're doing. You know, that it's like a weapon of mass destruction. She's a Russian asset. It's an alien. At one point they pass through Roswell, so people start thinking it's an alien corpse that's mind controlling them, and just all this insane shit. But it reaches a point where people start promising they have the inside scoop, and if you just subscribe to my newsletter for $6.99 a month, I will, like, this stuff cannot be told publicly. And I don't think there's another author who has their finger on the pulse of that bullshit machine quite so well. Yeah. Because I listened to the audiobook and it was so fucking hard to listen to sometimes because it was so close to the truth. Again, it's a fiction book, but Pargin has spent so much time on the internet, you know, since he was like the editor of crack.com back in the day. And he just has this innate sense of how those communities work. And it is enormously frustrating because you see it everywhere. And you're like, oh man, I don't remember having to wade through all this bullshit before. When I wanted to research this stuff, I just feel like the nonsense. It's like the Goat Man thing, you know. There's that bit on Crimes of the Paranormal about the Goat Man, and that's just a bullshit story. But there's all these schmucks who have a YouTube channel where they're like investigating the paranormal, and they just keep perpetuating the same garbage over and over again in this vainglorious attempt to carve out a reputation. And I sometimes it just feels like it's just nonsense piled on top of nonsense, and I don't actually know where it stops or starts.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think the thing is, the paranormal side, when it comes to ghosts and hauntings, is suffering from the same kind of swampy bullshit that completely encased ufology in the 90s, where you've no idea what's real half the time. And it just takes so long sometimes that I can understand why people get burnt out by it, because when you've been through it, you can kind of see it, the same kind of crap and cliches and tropes being used in ghost hunting and ghost investigations these days that were happening in ufology 30 years ago. And you still see it's like that Sasquatch video that appeared online a couple of weeks ago, and everybody's like, oh, and like TMZ are reporting, oh, this is the best footage ever. And it's clearly a man in a suit, and a bad one at that. But they're not bothered. They go all after it. Oh, it's everywhere. Yeah, this is real. Woo. And he's just like, fuck off, everyone. But, I mean, some Bigfoot community investigators were saying, well, things like this, yeah, they are frustrating, but at least it keeps the topic in the public eye. And I suppose it's a double-edged sword. But it is getting harder and harder. Sometimes it's like walking in molasses.
Yeah.
I think, when you try and pick through it all, and especially if you're late to it. I mean, you know, anybody that talks about Dybbuk boxes or demons or fucking haunted dolls and possessed beds and shit like that. I mean, come on.
Well, that's it. And honestly, like I'm not on TikTok very much. I'm actively trying to stay away from social media as much as I can. I'm trying to use my phone less. But you know, what I do see, some of it, I understand the appeal. I understand why it's valuable. But at the same time, I just, everyone, like dolls are just innately creepy. We know this. So every week there's a new haunted doll. Or, you know, it's like if it's slightly scuffed and they find it in the trash, it's haunted, because the whole point is now just generate engagement, to generate clicks, generate content, generate comments. I just can't be bothered. And it's really frustrating, because again, I love the paranormal. I make my living with the paranormal. And I believe that there is truly something, there is a dimension to our existence that is not easily quantifiable. But goddamn, if I'm not annoyed by just this avalanche of stuff that is clearly faked.
I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. There's only one haunted doll in the world, and that's the king, and that's Robert. There you go. He is the greatest.
Since I would not argue with that, out of concern for my own well-being, I will simply say yes.
He certainly is the hero we need. Fishing in the dark. So I was about 14 years old when this took place. We just moved to my grandmother's neighbourhood, perhaps 3 weeks prior to it. Down the road was a small pond that was in the middle of the next neighbour over. I'd regularly go down there to fish, as my dad's friend owned property on the pond. He'd a very nice house with a little gazebo that protruded out into the water a little bit. He lived right near a small dam at the end of the lake, and that dam was about 8 feet high, and on the side that wasn't facing the lake, there was a 50-foot concrete slope that went down into the woods below. It was a Friday night in January, and me being the avid fisherman I was getting ready for a trip down there the next morning. I went to bed kind of early with my dog and fishing buddy, Angel. She's just a Jack Russell Rat Terrier mix, and I'd had her since I was 6 years old. A man's best friend, for sure. Once we got into bed, I couldn't sleep for some reason. I kept tossing and turning, until I finally dozed off for about an hour, but once again woke up for no apparent reason and just couldn't get back to sleep. I looked at my phone to discover it was about 1:30 a.m, and after a short thought, I decided to just go down to the pond and start fishing anyway. So I grabbed my fishing pole, tackle box, my thermos, and Angel's leash, and we started walking down to the pond. Now, you might think I was crazy for going fishing in 20-degree heat, but I was really into fishing. Besides, I was having great luck fishing down there at night recently, so I was going to go and push my luck one more time. It was just a short walk to get to the lake, but I had to walk around it to the far side where I fished, which was another half-mile or so. It was really foggy that night, but I could still see pretty well because it was a full, or almost full moon. And it was extremely quiet too. Usually the road I was walking on is busy at all hours, but it seemed to be too cold for anybody else to be out there. We made it down to my dad's friend's house, and we walked onto the gazebo. I sat my things down and took a drink of hot chocolate before I started getting my line ready for the water. Angel found a small place in between the wooden benches to lay down, and we were settled. Now, this next bit may seem unimportant, but just bear with me. Once I'd got my fishing pole rigged up, I cast it out and sat down, waiting for a bite. My fishing reel has a setting where if a fish tugs on the line, it makes a nice loud clicking noise to let you know you've got a bite. And that's the setting I'd put it to. By this time it was around 2:30, and I looked over to the left at the houses, and then looked over to the right towards the dam, which was about 40 feet from where we were sat. Suddenly, I saw something out of the corner of my eye to the right. There, by the dam, I saw a white blob walking on all fours, looking as if it was smelling the ground. It seemed to look like a white dog from the distance I was at, and I didn't want Angel to see it, so I picked up a leash and kept an eye on the thing. At this point, I was still thinking it was a dog, and I wasn't that scared in the least, but it made its way towards the wall of the dam. And then it stood up on 2 legs, and I realised this was no dog. I crouched down beside the wooden bench where Angel was laying, grabbed her up and faced her away from the creature. The thing didn't see me, and I was going to do my damnedest to make sure it never did. I intensively watched it as it looked around the area, and then proceeded to jump up on the 8-foot-tall dam effortlessly, almost as if it had floated up there. And then it did something strange. Its pale white skin started glowing, almost like a firefly. I could see the bluish-coloured veins in its back and calf muscles, and this thoroughly freaked me out. And then it turned around to where I could see its face. It was about 3.5 feet tall, with a short torso, long skinny legs and arms, a wide head which was almost oval-shaped, large ears, a big mouth with many small teeth and huge eyes that were a yellowish-orange in colour. On top of all this, it was still glowing. I was nearly hyperventilating, trying to control my breathing, hoping that the damn thing wouldn't hear me. Angel was now aware of its presence, and the hair on her neck stood up as she started growling and struggling to get out of my arms. I kept watching, too terrified to move. It didn't do anything when it got up to the top of the dam. It just squatted down and looked as though it was examining something in its hands. After a few minutes of watching it, I'd worked up to the idea of just going back the way I came, and once I got on the road, running as fast as we could. Angel was growing increasingly aggressive in trying to see the creature, but I kept her buried in my big winter jacket the best I could. I've just decided I was going to leave my stuff there and come and get it the next day. I slowly stood up, and just as I was about to start walking away from the gazebo, my fishing pole started making the very loud zing sound. Of all the times to get a bite, it had to be now. My attention went straight back to the creature, which was now frantically looking around for the source of the noise. In my panic, I forgot to keep Angel covered up, and she saw the creature for the first time and started barking like I'd never heard her bark before, as if she was deathly afraid or something, and that scared me. The creature then saw us there, and it bent down as if it was about to start running towards us. I tried to take a step back and start running, but I slipped on the cold, hard ground. I landed on my side and looked towards the creature. Thankfully, it hadn't started to chase us, for it let out the most disturbing scream I've ever heard. It sounded like a woman screaming, but backwards, if that makes sense. It then jumped from the dam into the woods about 100 feet away, and faded as it landed. I was in tears now, and my fight or flight kicked in. I grabbed my little Angel and I ran as fast as I could all the way up to the door at my house. Too afraid to look back and see if it was behind me, I got home and I don't really remember what happened until the next day. I think I must have passed out or something. I remember it seeming like a dream, but the next day I went to go get my gear from the gazebo, and it was all still there. I didn't go back to the pond even during the day for a few years. I told my mum and dad the story some months later, and while they believed me, I still wonder what the hell that creature was.
So I will say I was on board, and I still am willing to entertain the reality of this one, but the woman's scream played backwards sounded a little too much like Gilding the Lily. What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure how you could describe a sound like that.
I was also thinking that. What does a scream sound like played backwards?
Or does he mean that it fades in? Because usually a scream will fade out, won't it?
Yeah.
Does he mean that? That's the only thing I could think of. If you play a scream backwards, it'd probably go, ah! Whereas normally you go, ah! There you are. Bit of Sonic for you there.
Masterful. Better than any sound effect archive I could possibly ask for.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of screaming.
Let's not investigate this any further. Mr. All My Exes Live in Dubai.
Just one.
Wink. Anyways, moving on.
But yeah, it's a very strange thing. I mean, I don't know. It'd be nice to know where that is.
I don't know is a short answer. There was really no way to tell. I was actually kind of curious to ask you. I mean, one of the things that I kind of thought about reading this is not the same thing, obviously, but I'm kind of curious because you know these things. Dogman, is that still something people talk about, or has that kind of died down?
No, it's probably more prevalent than it's ever been.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, because I just hadn't maybe heard it as much on the things I listen to, which is probably a credit to the things I listen to. Now that I think about it.
Yeah. No, it's still going on, still out there.
Interesting. And so, what are your thoughts on Dogman?
Well, technically, there's nothing in the fossil. This is the thing that always separates it from Sasquatch, Yeti, whatever. There's nothing in the fossil record that could be similar to an upright canid wandering the earth at all. Now, that does not mean that there is fossilized remains somewhere on this planet of some strange quasi-wolf type creature that may have adapted itself in a way that we are unaware of as of yet. I find that hard to believe, but it's not impossible. We still discover the skeletons of dinosaurs. It seems near on every week a new one's being discovered from all around the world, places like Australia and China, up in Canada. So there are places where, regardless of the arrogant perception that we've discovered everything and we know where everything is, which is palpable nonsense. Yes, flying a plane over somewhere and taking pictures of the ground is great, but you've no idea what's underneath the trees. You can say, look, we've discovered this area. Here's a picture of it. No, you haven't. You've just taken a picture of something. Usually trees. What's under the trees? What's in the trees? You can't tell me. You've just shown me a picture of trees. And so, on that part, you would suggest it is impossible for a dog-like creature to exist in that manner. Whereas Bigfoot and Sasquatch, we have numerous ancient lineages that lead us to upright ape creatures. Obviously, the most famous is Gigantopithecus, but you've got numerous ones that have been discovered in the Australias and the Pacifics. I mean, Homo floresiensis is another one that sort of put an end to people dismissing stories of little people. We know they existed. Therefore, you would suggest, well, if little people existed, why couldn't taller people have existed? So it's a very difficult one. I think the other aspect of it is that you've got different people coming at it from different agendas. You've got people who come up with this ludicrous religious connection, tying it to their belief it's the Nephilim and all that nonsense, which it is. Palpable, absolute, unabated nonsense. It's crap on every level. And the same for anybody that prescribes Bigfoot that way as well. Bullshit. Bollocks. Nonsense. And that's me being kind about it, I think. And so I struggle with it sometimes. However, there have been some very, very compelling first-hand accounts over the years. People have seen something, but I can't... The rational part of my brain, which, whilst this may sound strange to people, as I've just tried to sort of explain, is I can understand a creature like Sasquatch or the Yeti existing because we've got fossil record that shows there are similar creatures that have existed through time. That is without doubt. The Dogman is a complete outlier. It doesn't look like anything. I mean, and that's before you get into these idiots who say, well, it's not a Dogman, it's a werewolf. How the fuck do you know? You have no idea. You know, it's a man-wolf. Why are we trying to create labels, right? The reason people said that the Dogman came up not being like a wolf because it seemed to not behave in the way that the traditional history and behaviors of werewolves existed. And I think it's quite peculiar that the Dogman in the northern US and lower Canada has arrived, even despite the fact that Canada and Quebec, you've got the loup-garou, and obviously in the southern states, in the Mississippi Delta, you've got the rougarou, as we mentioned earlier. So you've already got two established werewolf-type legends in North America, and yet the Dogman's turned up and isn't connected to either of them. So is it the same thing? Are they all werewolves? Are they all dogmen? And what's the difference? And so, like I was saying earlier, when you've got things like the loup-garou and the rougarou, you've got these strange, almost European mythologies entwined into how you become one and how you get out of being one and what it does and what it doesn't do. Whereas a werewolf is just a savage animal that you have no control of, whereas the others seem to have a semblance of sentient intelligence and behavior. Because often people have mentioned in Dogman encounters that they feel as though the creature knows they're frightened and is enjoying it. There's a malice to it.
Oh, interesting. I didn't think I knew that about them.
Yeah, I mean, some people have said that they've had like thoughts go through their mind basically saying, I know you're scared and I like it. That kind of thing. And so what is going on? I don't know. I've spoken to people that have investigated. Obviously, Linda Godfrey's the most famous one. Chad's investigated a lot of the cases around that particular area. Morgan Knudsen has. It shouldn't exist on any level. So if it does exist in our realm, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it could be. Could it be? But there is no... This is the thing. I think often you can be constrained by the knowledge of nature as we know it now and how we believe things exist. That doesn't mean that there could be another creature that is completely alien to the rules of science on this planet in the way that creatures evolve. Or is it some kind of hybridized wolf that is seemingly larger than others? But the thing about the Dogman is people say it stands up. It seems to use its claws like hands, which is not what an animal does. I mean, a dog, if you own a dog will hold things in its paws, but it can't grip something. It can't hold a flag and wave it about or something. And so it's a real conundrum. And that's without even mentioning people labeling it as a skinwalker as well, because that's just lazy research and people who can't be bothered to treat indigenous culture with the respect it deserves.
Oh, yeah. Well, like we were talking about with that Crimes of the Paranormal episode, it's just something people will pull out of their ass.
Yeah. So that's a very long answer to say, yes, people are.
It's still being seen. No. I love hearing you talk about this stuff because, like, I was thinking about this the other day. I was just thinking, like, it almost feels like how creepypasta people try to, like with Slender Man, people tried to come up with, they like by committee tried to come up with the most frightening version of a thing. And to me, that's kind of what Dogman feels like. It's like, okay, so we've had Bigfoot. Bigfoot's old and busted. What's the new hotness? Well, what if he was Bigfoot, but with a dog's face and he's mean? And I it feels a little bit like that. I sometimes find myself suspicious of Dogman sightings. I mean, there are some compelling ones I've read, but also, it's not impossible that they're just talking out their ass. As we mentioned in the previous segment, there is a real desire for more of these things. And if we know anything based on our own actual experiences, is that your experiences are these experiences are uncommon.
Yeah. I mean, you've got, as with any facet of the paranormal, you've got grifters that are fully invested in this thing. I mean, I've heard one particular major proponent of Dogman claimed that he's got cast iron footage that will prove it within a shadow of a doubt, but he won't release it.
Oh, give me a break.
Precisely. So it's bollocks, mate. You know, this is like somebody saying, I've got this footage of these aliens from Roswell. 800 quid, you can have a copy. Are you interested? Yeah. And it's that kind of thing. And it's the same kind of cliches, like I say, once again. I don't know. But it is one of those things that the interesting thing about all this is that Wisconsin, as a state, has a lot of German influence to it.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Even like hanging pickles on the Christmas tree, which is a very odd thing for Wisconsinites to have kept hold of from their German origins.
I was unaware that this was a thing, but I love it.
Yeah, they have like a pickle ornament that they hang on their Christmas trees. So one could suggest, is this a remnant of their Germanic heritage? Because obviously werewolves are extremely popular from Europe. That's their main thing. But you've got werewolf stories from all around the world of dog-headed creatures, from Egypt to Africa to the Far East into South America. As I've mentioned, many indigenous tribes of North America have stories of dog-headed creatures. There's dog-headed stories from Greece. Obviously, the most famous is Lycan, King Lycan, where the werewolf mythos really sort of kicks off from and where we get the word lycanthropy.
Didn't realize that was the origin of that.
There you are.
There we go. We're all learning stuff from Paul today. I mean, I always do, but you know.
And so the werewolf dog creatures have been around for the best part of 2.5, 3,000 years minimum, with characters like Anubis and Lycan and the like. And so they've always been with us. They're one of the most prevalent myths in human folklore. And so for it to re-emerge in the last sort of 30 or 40 years in that particular area is interesting, especially as you can't culturally tie it down. You can't say, well, if we're going to get a big explosion of werewolf films, surely, of werewolf dogman sightings, surely they would have happened at the beginning of the 80s when two of the biggest horror films of that decade, The Howling and American Wolf in London, came out and sort of reignited werewolf films. And then you didn't really have any big successes through the rest of the 80s. So you can't kind of say, oh, everybody saw such and such, and therefore everybody now sees werewolves and dogmen running around everywhere because of this film. You know, like the Mothman prophecies. Nobody talks about the Mothman being seen anywhere else around the world until the film came out, and the Mothman montage at the beginning is showing it at Chernobyl and other disasters. That's when everybody starts talking about Mothman being a harbinger of doom.
Oh, interesting.
You can't find anything that predates that film.
Really?
All the Chernobyl stuff starts at the beginning of this century.
I mean, I didn't realize that people seriously thought Mothman had been reported as being present at Chernobyl. But again, I guess I shouldn't be surprised based on everything we've talked about.
If you've got a niche and you want to grift, you'll say anything.
Yep, that's fair.
You know, it's like nobody reported Mothman being sighted on the Silver Bridge until 30, 40 years later.
Yeah, because as I understood it, Mothman sort of appeared in the run-up to the bridge collapse.
Like a year before.
Yeah, but also was seen once or twice afterwards.
Yeah.
So it's not like because again, that narrative has kind of become, he was seen in the run-up to it. But of course, that's not the case. And yeah, he was also sighted afterwards.
I mean, you may say, because of the tragedy that happened at the Silver Bridge, if anybody did say, well, actually, I saw Mothman there, they probably didn't report it because they were too busy dealing with the massive tragedy and loss of life there.
That's fair.
And so they probably didn't want to sort of tarnish it or lessen the emotional damage that incident caused and how it affected that area. And probably near enough every family would have lost either a relative or somebody they knew that night. And so maybe they ignored those stories. But it's interesting that even Keel never talks about them being any reports. And I would suspect that any researcher worth his salt is, as with anything, if you have evidence and fact that make you feel uncomfortable or you don't like or you disagree with, well, that's fine. But you've still got to report the fact. You can't disregard things just because it goes against what you hope or what you want. And I say that as for both skeptics and believers. If the facts do not support your argument, you cannot ignore the facts that disprove what you're trying to say that's not how it works. And that works for both sides. And they don't do that, either of them. And that's why I've always said your arch believers and your arch skeptics are two sides of the same coin. They are both dogmatic in their belief and will ignore anything that lessens what they're trying to get you all to believe.
Crawling. In 2003, I was in Mumbai doing my senior year of college. My family had purchased a new house in the same area, much bigger and better than our old one. It needed to be repainted inside before we could move in, and I was named as project supervisor because I was usually done school by midday. Every afternoon when I came back from college, I would go home to eat, and afterwards rush to the new house where the interior work was going on. The laborers would work from morning until sunset, after which I used to lock the new house and go back home. Parallel to the renovation, my final exams were nearing, and I thought to quicken the pace by studying at the under-renovation house after the departure of the laborers. And since I can better concentrate during the late hours of the night, I have always preferred to study then. So, one evening I told my mother that after my supper I would go to the new house to study and sleep there, since my exams are nearing, and that I will be spending every night at the new house until the renovation is done and we move in. She believed it was a bad idea to stay in the new house before it was blessed and purified and the housewarming puja was done. My father told me to ignore my mother and that nothing would happen if I stayed in the new house before that puja or blessing was complete. In those days, I didn't believe in superstition, and even after my mother's strong discouragement from staying in the new house, I still went there with my books, a water bottle, torch, alarm clock, and an old mattress. The living room window was pulled out since we wanted to install the latest slider window in its place. Also, the entire house had no lights or fans because the wiring was being replaced. Oh, and this new house is on the top floor of a building. So I reached the new place at around 11:30 p.m. I stepped in and lit the only bulb in the living room. I placed the mattress on the floor and was soon lost in my study. I glanced at the clock. It was 2:40 in the morning, and I decided to go to bed since I had to be up for college before too long. Tired by a long day, I was soon pulled into a deep sleep by the chirping sound of the crickets. The night was cold with a full moon. The light of that full moon washed the outside land in a soft radiance. It was so bright that night that it dimly lit my living room with its mystic glow. Well, I'm not a sound sleeper, but that day I was so physically and mentally exhausted that I figured nothing could have broken my sleep. And yet, at one point while I was asleep, I could faintly hear a bunch of stray dogs barking and howling insanely outside on the street. As usual, I was sleeping on my right arm, and suddenly I could feel that something was crawling next to me in my bed. Slowly I woke. I opened my eyes thinking that I was at home, but then realized I was at our new house. The crawling, however, did not stop. Slowly and steadily I moved my body posture from the right arm to the left arm, and what I saw terrified me. In the moon's glow, I saw a lady sleeping next to me, wearing a sari with long, untied black hair and a red bindi on her forehead. She was looking at me and smiling. Her eyes were wide and red. Her smile revealed the white teeth underneath her lips. The entity was transparent, as I could clearly see the wall behind her. For a couple seconds, I was frozen, but then I bolted out of my bed and switched on the bulb. There was nothing. The lady was gone, no trace of her. Everything in the room was as normal as it was before I went to sleep. Still, I was so frightened that I was standing with my back pressed to the main door. The barking sound in the background had now reached its crescendo. Somehow I composed myself and grabbed the torch. With heavy steps, I checked all the rooms in the house, including the kitchen and the bathrooms. I closed all the windows and doors of the other rooms and came back to the main door, standing there alarmed. I checked the time. It was now 3:30 in the morning. Standing there, I started thinking, what if the lady came back? I thought to phone my parents, but it was very late and I didn't want to worry them at this hour of the night. Then I thought to cycle back to my home, but I was just too scared to do it. Then I thought maybe I'll wake my neighbors and tell them what I've just experienced, but I thought they would take me for a crazy person. Many thoughts went through my mind as I was standing at the door, and basically I just stayed there until the sun came up at 6 a.m. I hurriedly grabbed my things and cycled back to my house. Back at home, I told my mother about what had happened, and she scolded me for not listening to her and warned me not to stay in the new house until the housewarming puja was done. That morning, I didn't go to college, as I was a little feverish. It has been more than 10 years since this incident, but even today I get goosebumps and a chill in my spine when I tell the story. All right, Paul, I don't want to be crude about this, but I don't see the problem here. You woke up and there was a beautiful woman in your bed.
Too good to be true, my friend. There's danger there.
There. Okay. There. I see. This, you can't see it, folks, but this is the nodding glance of a man who knows.
I mean, I've woke up with a skeleton in bed. Yes, it was a plastic skeleton as well, thankfully.
I'm glad you confirmed that. Part of me thought, I'm sure it was plastic, but then I thought, was it? It's a Paul Bestel story. It might not have been.
Yeah, I can say with my hand on my heart, I know people who could get me a real skeleton in about 2 hours if I asked them.
This Big Lebowski shit. You want a toe? I'll get you a toe by 11 o'clock.
Hopefully it'll be clean.
But we can't say for sure.
Can't guarantee it. Might need a wash.
Man, I love that this story is yet another example of the genre where dad just will not listen. No one will listen to mom, and mom's the only one who's got any fucking sense.
I think the thing we've learnt about the paranormal is that fathers in the world of the paranormal seem to sort of represent the male tarantula, don't they? That they seem to serve a certain purpose, and then you wouldn't be surprised if people ate them because they just seem to be idiots.
Yeah, I mean, at least then they'd be serving some kind of purpose.
You know, you're talking shit, Dad. We're just going to eat you. Thanks. And just cut him up. Why not?
Well, again, at that point, one does wonder.
Oh, you're all terrified. What you need to do is drink more.
Yeah, have another beer. It'll be fine. It's just your mysterious lady parts making you crazy. Don't worry about it. Go back to sleep.
You know what your type of people are like? You're all hysterical.
That's right. Oh, God.
You know, children lie all the time.
I do love that. Like, ostensibly, this is the person who you've chosen to spend your life with. But the second they say something that doesn't immediately jibe with your personal experience, nope, you must have been replaced by an absolute lunatic. It's madness.
Yeah. All these people who just piss on your parade all the time. You know, you take joy from doing things and they go, why are we doing this? What are we doing this for? God, this is boring. Well, fuck off then. Go do something you want to do and don't drag everybody down because you're boring. Yeah.
Yeah. There's that too. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's, I remember when the term humble brag became a thing. And I remember thinking like, okay, while I agree that is a thing, you know, there's also just some people have lives worth talking about. And because you suck and you are either angry at or afraid of the outside world, the rest of us should not have to suffer for it.
Yeah, I work with someone who's just a creepy person and just an arch bullshitter. And he said something the other week about how successful his life is, and I just went, and yet here you are working with all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a guy in my team who was signed to a record label who knows more rock stars than you can shake a stick at and can play a guitar like I've never heard. You know, and he's just a great bloke. And it didn't work for him in the world of the music industry.
Right.
He works here. And yet, Brian Bullshit, apparently, you know, Crypto King 69, he's doing us all a favour by working with us because he's just so successful out of work. Yeah, incredibly single.
Yeah.
And seems to get dressed in the dark.
I love when you're bitchy.
He just seems to, you know, he's doing us a favour by entertaining us with his presence.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I feel like the internet has kind of really sort of proliferated guys like that, you know?
Yeah. Actually, he's the kind of guy, if he had a leaving do, people would just make sure he left.
The party happens after he leaves.
Yeah. There was one person who left about 3 or 4 years ago. It was before the plague. And they weren't a very nice person. You know, just horrible. Just one of those people that's just rude to everybody and just didn't like, you know, just one of those people. As soon as you see him, you feel your soul leave your body. And she'd worked at the business 30 odd years, and when she went on a leaving do, 4 people went. If that doesn't tell you,
that's rough.
I know for a fact that there'd at least be 5 because they'd want to make sure I was out of the building, and they got me pass off me. You know.
Before we wind it up, actually, that was something I appreciated about Joker 2 when I went to go see it, and I know It's
Right,
like, it's not there he goes. He's leaving. Like, it's not a great movie. You know, I went to go see it because I was bored and I'd seen pretty much everything else in theaters, including a Chinese neo-Western about human trafficking. But one of the things I appreciate about it, and this is slight spoilers for Joker 2, but none of you are going to go see it anyways based on the box office, so that's fine. But one of the things I loved about it is that a lot of the people who glommed onto that character as like their hero from the first film, these sort of never was incel types who spend all their time sitting in front of the computer and just talking about how like talented and special they are and how it's just a matter of time till the world sees it. They sort of took this guy on as their avatar. And essentially the second film spends 2 hours and 20 minutes, which is, it's too long, among other faults it has, but it spends 2 hours and 20 minutes just dragging that character's face through 16 miles of shit, as Morrissey once wrote. And I absolutely adore that it has every person who turned up that thing and wait saying to themselves, boy, I can't wait to see this next installment of the guy who's really me when I finally get my way. And that guy just basically spends 140 minutes crapping himself. It was a really lovely thing to see. Again, not a great movie. Don't go see it. It's not worth your time. But I appreciated that it did that instead of bigging up that person and trying to sort of stroke those egos. It just went, oh, hey, this guy, you identify with this guy? Oh, look, he just fell down in a toilet full of his own feces. Not really, but like figuratively.
Yeah. Those people.
Here he is getting fucked by a horse.
They're the kind of people who talk the talk, and then when the shit hits the fan in real life, they run off.
Oh, yeah. Like the equivalent to the Stolen Valor guys. The guys who never served a day in their life, but like to cosplay.
Get them over here.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
Like talking about being in Marines. Never been in Marines. Signed on all your life. What are you talking about, you fucking idiot? Pull a muscle, gonna shop, son. Sit down.
He's a super soldier.
Wearing camo does not make you a veteran, dickhead.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Look at me bullet wound. That's where you had your injection at school, mate.
You burned yourself with a cigarette when you were drunk.
It's where the Taliban tortured me. No, it's not. It's where you fell over drunk on Whale Front Pub, son. You're not captured in Tora Bora. Were you? You've never left Skegness. Calm down. Tora Bora. Right, yeah, mate.
Oh, I can't top that. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for our Under a Haunted Moon episode. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our Ghost Force shoutouts. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123 or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care. Welcome back. The Ghost Story Guys are Luke Greensmith, who helps us find our stories. He is also host of the Luke Lore podcast, available everywhere fine podcasts live. Tanya Downing, who manages our Facebook community. She's also co-host of the Streaming into Madness podcast with Walter Whitaker. Sarah Kent, who manages our Reddit community.
Our paranormal conductor is the marvelous Mr. Brennan Storr.
And my friend and co-host is the one, the only, the inimitable Paul Bestel, the paranormal Johnny Carson himself, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what's coming up at M&M?
Richard Freeman returns to regale us with some of the strangest and scariest stories in the world of the Fortean as we discuss some of the encounters included in his latest book, The Highest Strangeness, which includes one of my very favourites, if though slightly creepy, of a girl from the States who reportedly was continually attacked by the Count from Sesame Street every night while she was in bed.
Well, I have heard all of those words individually, but never put together like that. So I am very excited to hear that episode.
And there's lots and lots of other weird and wonderful, strange things. So, yes, it's certainly worth listening in to discover probably your favourite Fortean story you've never heard of before.
All right. And where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media networks and podcast sites.
Fabulous. I'm Largely the Truth on Threads, Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Instagram. And you can find Fear Daily, the horror fiction podcast I write, hosted by Brandon Scheck Snyder, everywhere. Find podcasts live. Again, that's Fear Daily if you want your daily fix of horror fiction, and that's available everywhere you get your podcasts and at feardaily.com. As we said at the top of the show, we really couldn't do this without our subscribers, folks who sign up at Patreon or YouTube or Apple Podcasts. You are truly the ones who make this show go. We are deeply indebted to you. And if you want to join that awesome community of people, head to the link in the show notes or head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. So that's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, or by signing up to GST Premium via Apple Podcasts and YouTube. And of course, if you support the show at the $20 level and above, that makes you part of an elite club. That makes you a part of a little something we like to call Ghost Force. That's right. Patrons who support the show at the $20 level and above become part of the elite club known only as Ghost Force. These fine folks get their names read out every second story episode because you're crazy and we love you for it. This time around, the members of Ghost Force are
Atham Saragon,
Bren wears a pink tutu,
Crazy Mom,
CT,
Floey Two Hats,
Gabrielle Hollanders,
Hannah Brown,
Hannah Siemens,
Hilary Desasur,
Jade Moores. Are you okay? Do you smell burnt toast?
I'm okay now.
Okay.
Thank you.
I guess of all the things I expected, that wasn't one of them.
That's what I like to do.
Nice work. That is a page. Never mind. I was gonna make a reference to a story I told Paul off air.
Don't do it.
Jason R. Slaughter.
Jennifer Mullen,
Jennifer Shipley.
Joseph Kamal,
Kissin, Kate Barlow.
Malevolent Clamato,
Mara Noriega.
Mark Semler,
Megan Rocket.
Merlin Hansen,
Nicola.
Peter Gunn 08.5,
Rebecca Brink.
Robin Tien,
Rockin' Ronnie Shenanigans.
Scrapbot 13,
Shannon Steyer.
Trans Cannon.
Yes. You're the few. You're the spooky. You are Ghost Force. For real, guys. Thank you so much. We appreciate all of our subscribers, but Ghost Force, you are a cut above the rest, and we love you for it. Genuinely, we appreciate you so much. And if you want to have your name read out in that segment, where you can pay us to say pretty much anything you want. Again, once a month, one of us says Bren wears a pink tutu, and I don't care. It is fine. I'm not going to say nope. We're not going to get into what I would and wouldn't say for money, but regardless. Let's just say it is it's
a very low bar.
Yeah, it's a low bar. We'll just say it's a low bar. What if it was something that went against Tottenham? If I was like Tottenham sucks, or
I'd rather eat shit.
Okay, all right. So we found Paul's barrier. We have not found mine yet. That's fine.
If anybody sends anything to do with the Dallas Cowboys losers, then I will come to your house and burn it down.
Oh, wow, okay. The gauntlet has been thrown. It's good. I think we all knew Paul had more dignity than I did, but now we know.
No, I just hide it well. That's my trouble cat. I'm always angry.
Learn more uncomfortable truths about us by signing up to Ghost Force at patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. Do you have any guest spots coming up?
Yes, I will be making a speaking appearance in late November at Airy Fairy in Sheffield.
Oh.
The date has yet to be confirmed, but I believe it will be £3 in. So when I know the date exactly, I shall share it, because I know a few people locally said they'd like to pop in, because I talked to them early in the summer and it went down so well that they've asked me back. So obviously it went a lot better than I thought it would do. Yes, so that's the only thing I've got confirmed. I've got a couple of other things in the pipeline, hopefully going to be sorted shortly, but that's definitely upcoming.
Very cool. I was recently on Weekly Creep and Into the Fray with Brandon talking about Fear Daily.
Yeah, that surprised me.
What's that?
I put it on Friday, Into the Fray, go to bed. And who can I hear? You and Brandon. Trying to relax, man. I just spent 5 hours with you both the day before, and then there you are again. In my ears.
So yes, you can hear us terrorize Paul from afar on Into the Fray or Weekly Creep. And the Into the Fray conversation kind of turned into a really interesting chat about missing people as well. We talked about some of the things that have come up on Ghost Story Guys recently. And again, you'll find all of that linked at ghoststoryguys.com. If you want some Ghost Story Guys merch, head to our website at ghoststoryguys.com. We have all kinds of cool stuff, including t-shirts, mugs, stickers, and the like, all featuring both our original artwork and some of our episode covers. Episodes like Keep Utah Weird, Ghosts of Miami, High Strangers in Chicago. You can get all of those on merchandise as well. And again, that's at ghoststoryguys.com. You can also pick up the audiobook version of A Strange Little Place 2.0, available now on Audible. Follow the link in the show notes. Leave me a lovely review telling me that this is even better than the last one. Oh God, I hope it's better than the last one, because the last one was
bad. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, it was my finest work.
4 words bad.
Well, there we go. That's very true. No argument here. All right. Our theme song, Radio, Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursov of Pizzanta Music. Find more from him by searching for Pizzanta Music wherever you get your tunes. And I guess that's going to do it.
We'll be back next week, but until then,
into the darkness we go. Oh, damn it.
Trying to think what film that's from.
Oh, I didn't realize it was from a film. I was just saying it because I'm a monster.
Let's rock.
Are you ready to... Anyways.
You want a party?
I was going to do something like that. I'm like, no, I'm going to blow up my voice. That's how it's going to go. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to sound like this for the rest of the show.
No, you've got to have that ability to do a high Axl Rose. Welcome to the jungle. We have fun games. To Mr. Brownstone, he's been dancing. I was like, that line was, I'm a mean motherfucker.
Yeah, only if we're married to you, Axel. Only if we're married to you.
Especially if you're a lady.
Yeah, exactly. Dog barking. I have 2 trucks going past.
The dog's driving the truck.
I know. Well, I mean, it's impressive. It's just, I wish you wouldn't do it at this time of day. Dog, figure this out for us.
That's right. Turn the water on.
He's so
John.
smart. You're the head of this fire department. Anyways.
Way to go, Fido. Oh my God.
What a bastard.
Do they have hands?
Well, what do they call them? The claws. I can't think of the word. Claws. The claws. Legs? Feet? Hands? I don't fuck. I couldn't think of the word. Claws. Paws? No.
Talons.
Talons. There we go. Thank you.
Shut your whore mouth.
Man, I'm going to make that a ringtone for the patrons. You saying, shut your whore mouth. It was a totally clean edit too, so I'm We've got one of you making Bigfoot noises. That's right, patrons. You can search it. It's in the archive. Paul says Bigfoot noises. You can make it a ringtone. Stately 3-storied colonial house. Jesus. Oh, I met a very cool new dog, little Dachshund, named Lyle, little brown guy. His owner came out of I was just coming home from the gym, and they obviously live in my building. Maybe they just moved in. I'd never seen him before, but this little dog just runs right up to me. And the woman, who was very clearly not happy Lyle's making friends, she's like, I'm really sorry. And I was like, oh, no, it's fine. And he just fucking starts like rubbing his head on my leg and starts trying to lick me. And she's like, oh, he never does that. Like, yeah, goddamn right, lady. Hero to dogs everywhere. So he didn't want to go. And I was like, no, I'm enjoying this. I'm really sorry. No, it's fine. And look, I get that you're gorgeous. I don't give a shit about talking to you. Don't worry. I'm not going to hit on you. I don't care about talking to you. I just want to talk to you.
I'm only here for the dog.
That's it. 100% I'm here for the dog.
Who are you again?